Dear great friends, esteemed guests, and distinguished participants, we are gathered here today for an incredibly important talk that delves into the medium and long-term consequences of possible, the most deeply impactful event in recent history. Today's great talk, titled An SDG-Based Assessment of the Impact of Russia's Aggression on Ukraine, Unveiling Two Nations' Fate, will provide a comprehensive analysis through the SDGs lens of the consequences resulting from Russia's aggression towards Ukraine. In this great talk, we have the privilege of hosting two eminent experts who have dedicated their recent research work to understanding the multifaceted dimensions of this conflict and the achievements in the SDGs. It is my honor to introduce our esteemed speakers, Lina Zadorozhnia, PhD, an analyst at the Kyiv School of Economics, and Nelya Rakhimova, PhD, Chair of the Coalition for Sustainable Development of Russia. Lina Zadorozhnia, a highly regarded analyst at the Kyiv School of Economics, brings her extensive expertise in assessing the impact of conflicts on economies and societies. She will focus on the Sustainable Development Goals. Dr. Zadorozhnia's research sheds light on the long-term consequences of Russia's aggression on Ukraine. Her work offers critical understanding of the economic, social, and environmental aspects affected by the conflict. Joining us too is Dr. Nelya Rakhimova, Chair of the Coalition for Sustainable Development of Russia. Dr. Rakhimova's profound knowledge and experience in sustainable development allow her to provide valuable insights into the broader regional implications of the conflict. By analyzing the SDGs from a Russian perspective, she presents a comprehensive picture of the long-term consequences that have emerged as a result of the aggression. During this great talk, we will explore the intricate web of consequences faced by both Ukraine and Russia in the aftermath of the conflict. By employing the SDGs as a framework for analysis, our speakers will unravel the profound implications for economic development, social stability, environmental sustainability, and other vital aspects of both nations' fate. We anticipate an intellectually stimulating and enlightening discussion as our distinguished speakers present their findings, examine the interconnectedness of the SDGs, and discuss potential avenues for sustainable reconciliation and progress. Through this great talk, we aim to foster a deeper understanding of the lasting impact of Russia's aggression on Ukraine and the imperative need for international cooperation in building a prosperous and peaceful future. I extend on behalf of all GCAP members our heartfelt appreciation to our esteemed speakers, Lina and Nelya, and to all attendees from more than 15 countries today. With this, give the floor to Manuela Tortora, our president, who will facilitate the great talk. Manuela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. Without further delay, Lina, please, you have the floor first. And thank you again for being with us from Kyiv.
Thank you very much. Now I'll share my screen with presentation. In Kyiv School of Economics, we, from the day 2 of the full-scale invasion, we started a project which estimates the damages that are made by Russian troops. And you see here that the direct documented damages of residential and non-residential real estate and other infrastructure as of April 2023 is more than $140 billion. The most significant damage were attributed to the housing sector, more than 54 billion. And the Russian military continued destroying military facilities, transport, energy, and industrial infrastructure. Thus, the damage caused by the transport infrastructure amounts to 35.6 billion and to energy sector 6.8 billion. All sectors of Ukraine's economy suffered losses as a result of Russian aggression. And here you can see also the issue of economics debate. That issue where my colleagues and I were happy to publish our paper dedicated to the economic impact of the full-scale invasion of first year of it. And actually all the issues dedicated to Ukraine, if you have time, you can also take a look on it. And starting Following a challenging year in 2022, Ukraine's export of goods decreased by 35% compared to 2021, and additional export of services fell by 28%. The implementation of the grain corridor and the creation of new transportation routes across Ukraine's western border partially mitigate the negative effect of the closure of traditional export pathways. But how the ordinary Ukrainians feel also in economical terms that there is a war, and I would like to share with you that slide with inflation. Now all the world tackling growing inflation, and you can see that in 2013, before the war started, the inflation was 0.5%. In 2014, when the war started, its growth almost up to 25%, and in 2015, it's rocketed to 43.3%. There was some period of stabilization with the lower number in 2019, but in 2022, with the full-scale invasion, our inflation again rose to 26.6%. The main factors behind inflation growth are the disruption of supply chain, destruction of production, reduction in the supplies of goods and services, and increased business costs. Also, one thing that I would like to talk is that an essential factor in maintaining some economic stability was the early implementation of an official fixed exchange rate for the hryvnia, and that measure helps to control exchange rate expectations and alleviate market pressure, despite a significant uncertainty faced by businesses at that time. Also, you know that to achieve sustainable development goals, you have to finance them. But now you can see how the priorities for financing changed in 2022. Here is expenditures of the Ukrainian budget, and you can see how defense was prioritized. Usually other countries has social protection or education and health care on the first place, but we has to finance defense because it's today crucial for our survival. At the same time, importantly, that military expenses are fully financed by Ukraine's own budget revenue. Ukrainian taxpayers, under that huge pressure, they pay their taxes. What's interesting that in February and especially March 2022, a lot of taxpayers paid their taxes in advance in order to support the budget to alleviate growing budget deficit. And also we're very grateful for all the international supports in form of grants and credits that we obtain. It's very important for us for financing key functions of the state. And also, I would like to say that international organizations made different projections for real GDP in 2022. In the beginning of that year, they were more optimistic, but in the end of 2022, their consensus was that approximately 1/3 of the real GDP might have been lost. Even though leading international organizations were quite accurate in estimating the potential decrease in the GDP from the first days of the full-scale invasion, but actions taken were insufficient for preventing it. And now I would like you to pay attention to the results of state of sustainable development goals in Ukraine that's presented in the report. And here is the information, but unfortunately it doesn't really represent the reality because data correspond to the situation prior to February 2022. As many data points have not been updated since then. And for example, you don't see the information regarding poverty. And probably the only thing that I can agree on is reduced inequalities, Sustainable Development Goal number 10. But I can agree on it, even though official statistics hasn't been published yet. It will be published only in August. But during wars, usually inequalities are reduced, and it's proved by a lot of research, for example, that's conducted Thomas Piketty, and we see it in other countries, and the same applies for Ukraine. So, but unfortunately, still we have to use official data. And if you would like to dive deep, I can recommend that in 2017, there was published National Baseline Report. In 2020, it was voluntarily national review. And in 2021, it was just monitoring report. So it's statistics that was published and which can be easily obtained via official site of the Statistics Service of Ukraine. And one important factor here that Sustainable Development Goals framework for Ukraine was institutionalized by the Order of the Cabinet of Ministers, and the war started in 2014. So it's already influenced that indicators that were chosen for tracking achievements. And we have 183 indicators, and unfortunately, till now, not all they are updated. Probably less than half is updated. Some of them will be updated for 2022 in August, and some will be updated only in January. But still, it's I should mention that data excludes the temporarily occupied territory of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, the city of Sevastopol, and part of the occupied territories in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, which means that from very beginning, the possibility of achieving sustainable development goals in Ukraine was at risk. And unfortunately, today, that goals can be described through the prism of war crimes committed by Russia, starting from killing civilians and deportation to ecocide. But I would like to tell the story of resistance, even though there are a lot of challenges. And you can see here that I already mentioned that there is no updated data for poverty, but I've decided to present here the citation from World Bank, which is probably the best description for the situation. Poverty in Ukraine increased from 5.5% to 24.2% in 2022, pushing 7.1 million more people into poverty and retracting 15 years of progress. Also, not all the indicators about education, number 4, is updated, but still we understand that approximately 500 children study abroad. The majority of them simultaneously study in Ukrainian schools, which means a huge pressure. And more than 12,000 teachers are abroad, and also 161,000 school children are internally displaced persons, not to mention the destruction of schools and other facilities which are crucial for achieving that goal. Okay, here you can see that again, as indicators were designed and chosen while the war actually was on our land. So one of the targets regarding sustainable cities and communities, it's quite difficult to actually describe as sustainable, because some cities were just fully destroyed. They doesn't exist anymore, like Marinka, Vuhledar, Mariupol, Bakhmut. But still, there is target 18.4, ensure timely public alert about emergencies through innovative technologies. And that indicator increased hugely. It's doubled in 2022. And that's not only because of the governmental efforts, but also here is example of application, повітряна тривога, which can be translated as air siren, air radar, which was developed by Ajax system, and this company idea is ST Falcon, with support of Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. And more than 11 million of people downloaded this application. And I believe that it saved a lot of lives because people were informed about the risks that there are. And also that application, it's also, if you would like to know how feel Ukrainians, you can download it. You choose some city, for example, Kyiv or Lviv, and understand when there is an alarm. You should keep your important things, possessions, take your children and go to safer place, whether it's in your home or go to shelter as quickly as possible, and evaluate how it's influenced your state, especially your mental state, because very often that alarms are at night, and no matter when there is 2 a.m. or 2 p.m., you should be prepared to take actions. And I think this is also a very good example of cooperation, public-private cooperation in a very broad sense. Also, another indicator about Sustainable Development Goal number 16 is regarding the mined area in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. It's shows the statistics, how many hectares of the mined area was, and also about cleared roads and railways. And you can see that till the 2021, we had less and less necessity for the mining, but unfortunately in 2022, due to the fact that there were occupied more territories, the mined area grew enormously, and unfortunately a lot of left areas mined because we don't have enough people, equipment, and it's a very expensive process. And data for 2022 actually includes not only Donetsk and Luhansk regions, but also Kyiv region and Kherson and Zaporizhia and other Kharkiv region. And probably the only goal that we have fully updated data, which is Partnership for Sustainable Development. And here you can see that one of the indicators is the ratio of private remittance from abroad to GDP, and actually that indicators that benchmark which was achieved. But for example, net foreign direct investments, that indicator has not been achieved. And what's more, the indicator for 2022 is very low, which again shows that investors afraid of investing to Ukraine because of huge risks that they have. Also, ratio of gross external debt to exports of goods and services in annual terms increased, and it's almost reached the data for 2015, which is also very negative, and a number of projects of public-private partnership hasn't grown, but I hope we'll have some good statistics next years. And also we try to survive, and we have strong civil societies. And one thing that I would like also to mention is that we have a lot of charities. That means that every help is very quickly institutionalized, And in 2022, we have more than 6,000 newly established charity organizations. And there are different types of them. For example, Come Back Alive, it's target primarily some military necessities, while, for example, Kyiv School of Economics Foundation, it's focused on helping talented people and rebuilding shelters in schools, because a lot of schools, in order to provide education, they has to have shelters, and unfortunately sometimes they are not in a good conditions. And also we have example of another initiative, United 24, is actually not a charity, it's platform through which everyone can directly donate to Ministry of Social Policy or Ministry of Defense. And it's a very good example when there is decrease in administrative costs. And special legislation were introduced to make it possible. So please support Ukraine in any way that you can do it. Learn about Ukraine. For example, you can watch the lectures of Timothy Snyder, The Making of Modern Ukraine. Cooperate with us, and thank you very much for attention. Slava Ukraini. And if you're brave enough, please visit Ukraine. And not only will have the opportunity to communicate in person, but also you'll have the possibility to see how we live and resist. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lina, for the presentation. Again, it will be posted on our website so that you can look more carefully at these numbers and the references that are posted there. And now I will give immediately the floor to Nelya, so that we can have also the point of view from Russia regarding the SDGs. Nelya, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Geroyam Slava. I just will echo the presentation of Lina. Do you see my screen? Perfect. So yeah, I will try to be as brief as possible. I can tell you that I will have a bit different kind of presentation because I'm representing, as Manuela mentioned already, Coalition of Civil Society for the Sustainable Development of Russia. We include different kind of stakeholders within this civil society coalition. Also, we have academia representatives, but also activists and people who work on the ground for different marginalized groups in Russia. Many of our members left Russia since the beginning of the war, but 50% of them, or a bit less, are still there. And of course, many of them, actually, many people and organizations had to leave the coalition due to political pressure. So we actually shrink the numbers. So just for your information, Russia has actually in Ukraine also in 2020 reported first time an SDG implementation. And that time we first time as a civil society presented alternative civil society report, and you can still find it also in English on our webpage. And that time we first time actually analyzed the situation, what is happening in Russia. And that time we actually were ready to build a dialogue. We provided a list of recommendations, what it's possible for Russian Federation to do actually to improve the situation on SDG implementation. But since then, of course, everything changed. And in 2023, we released a new report, which we called Invasion of Ukraine, Implication for SDGs in Russia, where we again analyzed the situation. But for this time, we actually looked at the different kind of indicators in both qualitative and quantitative data. But exactly what happened since the beginning of the war, how the situation has changed inside Russia, and how it's affected international relations of Russia in different kind of fields. And I will, first of all, we have this report printed in Russian, so I can tell in English, I'm sorry, we have it printed in English. And if you would like to have a printed copy where you can read on all available data, please let me know in chat. We can especially send it around for free around Europe. So yeah, if you want to have a copy, we can send it to you. In preparation of this report, we engaged 20 experts from different fields, and 14 of them are anonymous due to political pressure, and because many of them are still in Russia. And of course, they don't want to face any kind of repressions which are growing from, I would say, day by day. So I will focus on some of the SDGs. As I mentioned before, I really appreciated that Lina demonstrated in her presentations particular numbers. You can also find them in our report, but I will probably give you more an overview that you have an impression what has happened in Russia since the beginning of the war. First of all, of course, if we are looking at first line of SDGs, which are connected particularly to the quality of life of people, which is poverty, quality of nutrition, good health and well-being, education, we observe, of course, like worse situation in this particular SDGs. First of all, of course, more people face poverty. Even Russian state actually trying to provide more financial support to families which are fighting, which are directly involved in war. We know that in particular sectors, salaries were increasing, especially in the military sector and oil field sector, but still the majority of population, due to international sanctions, due to the situation that many international organizations left the country, they are experiencing shortage in their income. And as well, the same situation is observed with, of course, food costs. We are observing that the prices are getting higher, and especially again due to closed international trading system with Russia. And we also our experts also highlighted that it can be also a long-term problem, because Russia, like the particular sanctions are affecting also agricultural sector of Russia, also including, for example, meat production, because we don't have vaccination, we don't have, I don't know, particular seeds and fertilizer, which were previously exported from, for example, European countries. So yeah, I will skip some SDGs. You can read it, and Manuela can then also share the slides, because I just will give some highlights that we are on time. Here, I think I would like to focus on particularly on SDG 10, because what we are observing in the last year, that that marginalized groups, like particular ethnic groups, LGBT community, especially people in prison, are experiencing more pressure from the government. If we are talking about ethnic groups and indigenous peoples, they are more likely to be sent directly to war. And as a result, we see that definitely the number of victims in particular ethnic areas are much higher than, for example, ethnical Russians dying in the war. The same, I think you've heard particularly what is happening with the LGBT community. Sometimes we think that this discussion is used to distract attention of Russian population and to redirect it fighting LGBT peoples, transgender peoples by the state. And again, we just recently experienced new wave of laws which are basically eliminating life of transgender people in Russia. And this is more like a growing snowball of policies that are developed by Russian government. And yeah, the same, we see that, of course, different people perceive it differently, but the situation with prisoners, of course, many of them were directly involved, and we recently saw what can happen with that in fighting in Ukraine. But at the same time, we know that many of them were forced to go there and then were even shot without any particular reason if they, for example, rejected to go into fights with Ukraine. Here, I think I will quickly stop on SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, because definitely the recent sanctions, what we were observing, even with our, daily experience, my colleagues, that lots of projects which were engaging international scientific knowledge, international investment, which were actually directed to, cleaning water facilities or construction, new production lines, and also scientific exchange. Everything has stopped, more or less immediately. And of course, in long term, it means that Russia will be completely isolated and disconnected from scientific development, and even before we were not really advanced, but right now, of course, it will be more complicated. And on top of that, of course, the majority of educated, most innovative people left Russia and live in Russia during, of course, due to, of course, threat of being dragged to the army, but in general, because of basically lack of possibilities and opportunities for career and development. If we're talking about environmental protection, of course, it was completely pushed back, everything, all the policies. We observe militarization of the economy. We've seen even changes of environmental policies. Basically, there is green light for any military industrial way of development. And recently, again, this is not mentioned in the report, but you probably seen it in the news, that the largest environmental NGOs as Greenpeace and WWF were completely removed from operation in Russia. And of course, we can just, and additionally, I can tell you that we also observe more and more pressure on civil activists, environmental activists. We even have a special research done by colleagues how environmental activists are suppressed in Russia and how this is changing, and more people are threatened to go into prison just for protecting their small, ecosystems around the town or region. Oh. And of course, the most important, what I think is really essential to mention here, it's SDG 16, because I think this is, I was saying it even before the war, and I'm saying it right now, that I think for such kind of states as Russia, SDG 16 is the most important. We will not see progress anyhow if we don't first deal and achieve at least have some progress. And SDG 16, we see, and also I've heard that somebody mentioned if we will discuss the recent situation in Russia, and I can say that the recent situation in Russia is just demonstrating basically that there is no rule of law in Russia anymore. And this is what we observed as activists. This is what we observed as citizens. And of course, we understand right now that the whole political situation and pressure on civil society, on citizens, fear, I don't know, repression, corruption, the inability, even availability of data, even if we are talking about SDG implementation, because this is, for example, what Lina was showing about budgets, like how much money spent on that. And this area, basically right now in Russia, it's not even available. We cannot even estimate like how much money are going to the military services. It's now basically secret information, and that's why to even evaluate such things in Russia, it's not possible. And of course, if in previous report we were talking mainly about foreign agent law, when civil societies were like under, I would say, some pressure at that time, we didn't even know what can happen in the future. But right now, basically, yeah, we know we have more than 600 political prisoners. We have thousands of cases against people who actually called war a war from the first days. And this number just will grow. And of course, in terms of, SDG 17, Russia, continue trying to work somehow internationally and provide support to particular countries. But we know that lots of international organizations already do not take Russia as a serious partner. So, and in conclusion, I can say that in our report, as I mentioned, we didn't provide any recommendations to the government. We do not see possibility now to work and negotiate something with this particular government. We don't take serious their statements at the UN about how they are committed to SDG implementation, and also in our report, we made just one recommendation, that we want Russian government to remove Russian army from the territory of Ukraine. And basically, this is our main message of the report, that we see all these consequences, but the first thing, if we want to continue with this SDG implementation in our country, we have to stop the war. And unfortunately, this recommendation is still there. Even the report was released in the beginning of March this year. So, and we also call in the report to that international community support different complaints and recommendations that are submitted by civil society, by activists to the international bodies of UN and other, I don't know, EU system, because independent Russian civil society needs this support. We still want to make changes in the country, and I am sure it will be possible one day. And basically, this is also would be my message right now to you, if it's possible to consider this. And I actually made the last slide because I saw Lina's example on SDG index, and I can tell you I'm tracking SDG index and how Russia develops over the years. But of course, we need to understand that this data is available data is super limited. And we can see even here that Russia has a green arrow in a partnership area in the last report, which is, to my mind, is absurd. But nevertheless, just because we have such limited number of educators and such limited number of data, we can refer to SDG index somehow, but of course we understand that it doesn't reflect the reality. I mean, it's the same with Belarus. Colleagues also always complain about this index because, yeah, with freedoms, it's completely different situation. So I will conclude here that we have some time for questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Nelya, for these inputs. I wrote the link of the report. Is this correct? The one that I wrote on the chat column, so that people can access it online, and it will be, again, it will be posted anyway on our website with this same link. So we can open the debate now. So please, if you have questions or comments, don't hesitate. And I see Mohan's hand there. So Mohan, you have the floor.
It wasn't a question. I was just applauding the two reports. It was basically a clap, but well done to both authors for being very frank with their assessments. I think this is very much needed right now. I have not very much to say because couldn't quite see the details of the screen because I couldn't enlarge it, but maybe other colleagues or friends would have comments. I'm happy to yield the floor.
Thank you, Mohan. While there are other comments or reflections, I don't see them now on the screen, but I certainly have one. Oh, Cécile Molinier, please, Cécile.
Thank you very much, Manuela, and thank you so much to the two of you for sharing with us the status of the SDGs in your respective countries. I have a question about the extent to which there is any kind of discussion or relationship between civil society groups or organizations in Russia and in Ukraine. I get the sense from what you said, Nelya, from what I've been reading, that things have been extremely difficult for civil society in Russia even before the war against Ukraine actually started. So I wonder to what extent civil society is and will be in a position to have a meaningful dialogue with the Russian authorities once the war stops. So this is my main concern, beyond, of course, concern at the information that you shared with us. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I mean, frankly speaking, it's really complicated question because it depends who will be the next in power. Because, I mean, right now, we, as I said, we were in a dialogue with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We were in a dialogue with Ministry of Economic Development before the war has started. We had a really good relationship with the special representative of Russian president to international organizations on SDG implementation. But many of colleagues with whom we were in communication, they actually resigned and left the country as well. So even they were in governmental structures. So my point is that I don't think that at least this coalition, which I am leading, willing to now try to build a productive dialogue with the government that leads the war. When the war will stop, we need to see what is happening, who is in power, on which circumstances it stopped, if it would be even safe again to have this dialogue, because I mean, I am based in Germany. I have privilege to actually today speak openly to you about the results of the report and so on and so forth. But I know that many of my colleagues, they are not so privileged. So that's why there are so many factors to consider. So it really depends. Like we've seen again, what was happening just on the weekend. If, for example, suddenly this type of people are in power who were trying to get the power or whatever they were doing, like, again, it would be a huge question, like, are we going to try to build dialogue with these people, or it's kind of useless, you know, because like what kind of agenda they have in their mind. So it's really hard.
Thank you, Nelya. Can I ask the same question to Lina regarding the role of civil society in Ukraine right now? And then I will give the floor to David.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy to say that we have strong civil society and societies that influence actually a lot of processes in our country. The civil societies that can organize, and maybe it's not a good example in the country of the state of war, but we have some people that openly criticize, for example, our leaders, and at the same time they are honored to have some awards because they have achievements in other areas, and that's know-how influences their activities, and this gives a lot of possibility to people to say we have a lot of different platforms where activists can gather and support some idea, present it to. We also, for example, need only 25,000 of votes to present some idea on official level to be seen and discussed by the president. So it's quite a low limit. You see 25,000 for country with 40 million people. And I think that's probably the key factor of our resistance, because there are a lot of people who are willing to take responsibility, who are actually in the country, despite all the obstacles, and trying to build life better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have David and then Gabriel. David, please.
Nelya and Lina, ja благодарю вам, отличная презентация. I want to ask you from the Ukrainian point of view and from the Russian point of view, what is the feeling of the people? Do you see a general sense of optimism that this is going to be a shorter term thing, or that is just going to go on and on and on, as we have seen in other wars? What is the people's feeling, not of the government, but of the people? So Lina and Nelya.
If I may, there are, of course, a lot of discussions, and overall it is positive expectations. But frankly speaking, I less and less see that people share such huge optimism that can be end in a couple of days or weeks, as it was in February 2022. And also a lot of people suffered, they lost their homes, their loves and the beloved people. And all that, of course, made them think that we should somehow adapt to it. And it's unfortunate for us that we had such a huge war on our territory. We really see some examples of other countries, for example, Sweden, when there were no wars and people could, just inherit something. Because in Ukraine, for example, almost everything was destroyed during previous wars. Another, we have Holodomor, and there is an excellent museum in the center of Kyiv, where you have a huge books in which there are names of people, and you can find, it's terrible when you can find the name of your relative and understand that that person you lost just because of some order. And now we have another situation again, when we lost everything and still we should to live and rebuild. So it's huge pressure, it's true.
Nelya, please. Nelya.
Yeah.
Nelya.
I can tell you that, I mean, my answer would be much more complicated because society is divided, and it's there are people who I would not lie who support the government, and they basically say do whatever to make us win, and it should last as long as it should last. And of course, there is another part of the society who demands, as we do, that we need to stop it as soon as possible. And so that's why I think there is no really, such kind of like estimation how long it lasts. I know that a big part of at least my bubble, like people I communicate with, they support Russia, they support Ukraine also financially and morally, and we really, and I know some groups in the society who even try to form some military forces that actually fight on Ukrainian side. So only thing I can say that definitely there is a part of Russian society that tries to do everything to make it to end as soon as possible.
Thank you, Nelya. So if I'm not mistaken, I have the other David Dror, then I have Gabriel, and then a question from Sergio that is on the chat. So David Dror this time, please.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Thank you very much, Lina and Nelya, for your presentations. This is a Gray Cells activity. Gray Cells is an organization of former international civil servants. That reminds us of the United Nations and its charter, which has been, still is, to end all wars, to find ways to deal with major international intergovernmental conflicts through means other than destruction, killing, and loss of hope. What we have heard today is views that can only be defined as heart-wrenching, even if they are formulated to a certain extent in more dispassionate and technical terms. Clearly, this war, nobody can predict when this war will end, and nobody can predict the total loss at the end when one can make some kind of a provisional summary evaluation, not only on the SDGs, but in particular on how then to rebuild societies. And I allow myself to say societies because I think there is more than one society that will need to be rebuilt, just as we have seen other wars where there is a lot of collateral damage and a lot of social destruction, in which NGOs are on the one hand the only thing that can work, but on the other hand, they don't have the power and they don't have the money, and it is extremely difficult to build the reconstruction only on NGOs. So it's a very sad event in a way to talk about it, but I'm very grateful to Alejandro, to Manuela, and of course to the presenters for having had the courage to share with us something that is really very, very difficult. And it is particularly difficult for those amongst us in our age group who still remember other wars. I know that very many people have never lived through a war, but there are some who have. Some of us in the Gray Cell old-timers were born during the Second World War. I was, and I'm certainly not the oldest or the only one. And we lived through other wars. So the basic message I want to say is we were committed, we've always been committed in our professional lives to finding ways towards development, but also towards resolution of major conflicts in means and ways other than total destruction. Because at the end of the day, it's a lose-lose proposition. And what we're hearing today is there are two persons from two countries that are at war, but there are no winners to this thing. It's a lose-lose game. And it's a very sad reality that we don't maybe live every day, but it's important to make the statement. So maybe this is not exactly a question, and maybe this is a very personal thing, but I feel very grateful for your courage to have come out and talk, but I feel very sad that the UN is unable to have developed sufficient tools to deal with crises, and crises there will always be, in a way that leaves people a bigger margin to live, to create, and to resolve problems.
May I react, Manuela?
Oh, Nelya, go ahead.
Yeah, I completely hear you, and I kind of, it's not a proposition, but I think our main problem is right now, and part of the problem is our Security Council at the UN, how it's created, how it functions, and I think we really, I mean, I unfortunately don't have this power, but maybe you have connections to some key decision makers, because we understand that, like, yes, the structure was created, but it was created by humans. Like, okay, it's not even the Bible, which is sometimes I think is changing from one way to another. And I think it's possible to change Security Council, but it should be a really strong coalition of governments to make such suggestion, because yes, we understand that these big global powers countries which are leading Security Council right now, but like there is time to really rethink the structure, and we really need to do something about it. Unfortunately, we don't see this will. Of course, there are different interests behind each country. And yeah, I don't know who should make this push: civil society, demonstrations, discussions behind the curtains or something like that. But I mean, frankly speaking, we like, yes, we see this war, but how many more around the world, and how many more will come? So it's necessary to reconsider the structure. And yeah, I think, I don't know, it's maybe our generation which should start to do something about it.
Gabrielle, please, you have been waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Lina and Nelya. Very moving and very discouraging in some ways, but at the same time also encouraging, because a lot of the narrative, I don't know what it's like in other countries. In Germany, there's this narrative that the entire Russian population is behind Putin. The entire Ukrainian population is uncritically behind Zelensky. And so it's extremely valuable. Thank you for sharing these nuances of what is going on. There is an opposition. So my first question is, how can we better disseminate this alternative narrative from your two countries? And my other is a sort of UN procedural question. I was really, shocked, and at the same time, or mesmerized by the fact that one can actually use the SDGs to report very, very negative things. So, SDG 11, how much demining is going on, or SDG 1, what is poverty, what's happening with the poverty, or the health SDG, about people who are affected by injuries, war injuries. Can we bring this to the high-level political forum in any way? Because I think that would be a really useful adaptation of that process, which, as we know, is mainly sort of green, blue, whatever washing the country experiences. You both reported on the earlier SDG reports by Ukraine and Russia. Could we find a way to disseminate these alternative SDG reports at the high-level political forum? Thank you.
Wants to react, Nelya or Lina?
I mean, I can definitely react on the question about HLPF, because I'm also part of a global coordination mechanism of major groups and other stakeholders, which is like a global system of engagement of civil society. This is governmental decision. Governments do not want to see alternative reports. This was highlighted during the HLPF reform, which was happening in recent years. And the same I can say about indicators. I am sure that Russia will be in a position to look at these indicators, and Russia will ban it in one way or another. That even we understand that it's relevant not only for Ukraine, there are other countries in the world, but there are governments who will definitely against it. And as we know about many processes in the UN, also with shadow reports, alternative reports, we are advocating about it every year. That's why actually this year we released our own mgos.org webpage, where we collected all shadow reports, and this page should be linked to the UN page. So we at least trying to create this connection that that people have at least some way to get to the alternative information, because of course UN refuses to publish our reports. So yeah, I mean, we need to be realistic here. It's the same as with Security Council. Before, if there will be no strong coalition of particular governments to make these changes, to push this forward, it will not happen. We as civil society can advocate, of course, nationally. We can advocate it during the HLPF and raise these issues. But yeah, we, of course, realistic about what we can achieve in this process.
Thank you very much, Nelya. I would like to go back to the chat column because Sergio's question is still there. He's asking to both speakers, is the UN seen and perceived as helping in any way? There is little or no information in the major media outlets on the role of the UN. Do regular people in Ukraine or Russia see the UN as a valid intermediary to mediate and find peaceful avenues to end the conflict and rebuild? To both of you, whoever would like to start. Nelya, please.
No, actually, I wanted to say maybe Lina starts. Oh, we cannot hear.
Lina, you are on mute.
Yes, thank you very much. We do hope that UN will have more voice and power to say something. Unfortunately, today we don't see that much impact, but still Ukraine is one of the countries that actually is behind UN. So we have share long history. But we see that there are a lot of events to which our international society not prepared, starting, for example, from 1983, when there was by Soviet aircraft that was killed, South Korean aircraft, and unfortunately, international organization didn't found the way. Then we have MH17, 16, I'm sorry, in Ukraine, and again, we didn't obtain the reactions that we expected. We do hope that there will be some mechanism, and I'm sure that our diplomats are working on it, but still we need a lot of cooperation. And one of the things that what we see today, that international cooperation, it was intensified and broadened, and but still looking at UN actions, we need more, definitely. I mean, it needs something new, more, and faster. That's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Nelya?
Yeah, I can just say that I more or less already mentioned the situation with the Security Council. In terms of, I can talk on behalf of Independent Civil Society of Russia. Of course, we still use UN as a platform where we can at least address Russian government in confrontational way right now. But yeah, it's at least for us still possibility to speak to them. We, frankly speaking, I recently do not approach them personally at the events, again, due to clear situation, but at least we still can use UN as a platform where we send them our message. But in terms of peace building, yeah, I completely agree with Lina. And again, we need the reform. We need to reconsider the structures.
Thank you very much. I do not see other questions or comments, at least not on the screen and not on the chat. So just a final personal note, not only thank you to both Lina and Nelya, that's obvious, but I would like to share with you that I felt very, very proud and personally touched by the fact that I managed to put together a Ukrainian and a Russian together on the screen at the same time on the same topic.
Manuela is not the only one who is proud in this moment. I think we are all proud, and we are thankful to Lina and to Nelya because of their presentation and their courage. This was really a very inspiring and moving presentation. We knew from the outset at GRACES that in 1 hour or a few minutes more, it would be impossible just to address all the issues that would be needed to be addressed. But I think that through the messages and through the positions that Lina and Nelya shared with us, I think that we can have some kind of hope. It's really inspiring to see young people, young professionals working on these issues. I always said when I was UN staff that almost every day I had reasons to be pessimistic, and almost every day I had reasons to be optimistic. And it was a roller coaster every day. And in the case of this war in Ukraine, I have been in the down path for a long time. And just knowing that young people are addressing this issue from a different angle, and particularly from the UN angle, and talking so much about change is really very inspiring. I would just like to mention one additional point that I'm sure that could lead us to have some other great talks. It's what I would call the shadow price. Both Russia and in particularly Ukraine, they're wasting your time. This is time that people could have been working. This is time that people who could have been developing arts, science, development, all the things. And it's the life of many people, the livelihoods of many people, and the time of so many generations. And I'm afraid that this will not only impact these days and these current generations. We know from previous wars, as was mentioned by David Rohr, people coming back to the US from the war in Vietnam. You had for decades people with traumas, with people with problems in dealing. And I'm sure that this is something that it's not accounted for, but is something that will have an impact. I was really optimistic when I heard the question that was mentioned and the importance of change. And I really find it really paradoxical. To me, it's really like in the glacial era, we would have asked the dinosaurs if they were willing to change their livelihoods to survive. And they would say, no. Why change? We're controlling the whole world. But then after the glacial era, wiped them away. And this is something that now the nations, I think that they are not really realizing that it's not just a willing to stay in the current situation as they are, but there is a need for change to survive. Darwin was completely right. those who survive and those who change. And the world needs to change. The UN need really to change. And I was also very optimistic because some of the comments and the answers to get out of this vicious circle that we are in come to the voice of different actors, not only the governments, but also civil society. And for example, Nelya and I, we were in a particular side event of a broader coalition for the UN we need. So there is already a sense that we need something else. We don't exactly know what we need, but it's got to be different. And the different actors, in particular the civil society, has to be heard. So it's really very inspiring. And just as a note there, we have 3 big summits around the corner in the next 3 years. The summit of the SDGs in September this year, the summit of the future next year, and the social summit in 2025. In great sense, but I know also that Nelya and other NGOs, we're working to have our voice heard in those summits. So thank you very much again, Lina and Nelya. You made our day. I think you made our year for many of us. Thank you for your inspiring work, and thank you for your courage. So I hope we will keep in touch. As Manuela said, we will post in our website not only the recording of this session, but also your PowerPoint recording and any additional material that you would like to share. It would really can become a platform available to you to share any kind of developments or updates that you would like to share with us. Thank you really very much indeed to both of you. Thank you to all the participants. Bye-bye.